I'm trying to. Plug this in. Hi, Steve. It's just you at the moment. This might be quiet. I'll just wait one more minute, and if not, we'll kick off.
Yeah. Right, I'm here. Oh, I'm muted.
Hello.
Ready to go.
Thanks.
Yeah, I promised Caroline I'd sit on one of these because I've missed a few lately. So I thought, right, time to have a chat.
You've picked the right week, Steve. We're all yours. There's nobody else on the call today at the moment. So anything that you have to ask, we're available.
Well, I don't know what I've got to ask, to be honest.
That's
I just
good.
Listen, you know, I just.
Well, hopefully we can give you some insights into what's been going on and what cases we've had. But yeah, doesn't look. I don't know whether people aren't joining as they're aware that Caroline's on holiday.
All right.
Oh, you've got all three of us now. So you've got Nadia as well as me and Catherine. I've just said to Steve, Nadia, that he's got us all to himself at the moment. So he's free to ask anything, but he hasn't got anything to ask. So I said, well,
I might start thinking of something because I'm sitting here, to be honest.
Oh, don't worry. Don't worry. I'm sure there's nothing. I'm just trying to think of the cases that we've been dealing with this week. A lot has come up about buggies and their use in winter. So that I don't know whether that's kind of applicable to you. We've had a lot of questions about
what do you guys do with buggies in the winter?
When
do you ban the use of buggies?
Yeah, you can't ban them. You have to do a daily inspection and log your inspection. Yeah. So that if anyone with a disability comes up and says, but I want a buggy to play golf, you've got a valid record of why. And you can't, and you have to go out of your way to try to give some sort of playing, whether it be just one or two holes. You have to try your utmost and give valid reasons. If they was to take you to a disability tribunal, you'll be done if you didn't. But what we actually do is we've actually purchased off of old members 3 small single-seater buggies. So when we take the 2-seaters off, we treat the single-seaters like an electric trolley.
That's a good idea, yeah.
So therefore, they are still able to use the single-seaters all the time. We haven't got a trolley ban.
Right.
So therefore, we feel that we at least are making a big effort to accommodate every possible golfer that would want to use the course at any time. Yeah. And obviously, at the moment, we're on a carry only, so they don't have a lot of strength in any argument, because obviously we're not being vindictive to them. We're being the fact the course can't take trolleys, therefore it can't take buggies as well. So
yeah, that's great. We've had like I said, we've our advice to the clubs has been, you know, if the club is still open, it should be available to all, unless there's a health and safety risk, as like you've said yourself. Unless that health and safety risk exists, then there is no reason. You know, we've had clubs say, oh well, you know, we can go through the semi-rough, but it causes a bit of damage. Well, that's irrelevant. You know, they still have to make, like you said, you have to make those provisions for all players, whether or not there's going to be damage done to the grounds, or, you know, that's the club's responsibility. So it's great to know that you've got that, and that you've got contingency in place as well with the single. Maybe that we'd suggest that to other clubs if they haven't already got that kind of facility in place. It's obviously a worthwhile investment for you. Do you have a lot of
We've got a lot of members that have got their own single seaters as well, but obviously we have a permit system for those. We have to see their insurance to make sure that if there is to have an accident, because we have to cross a road here, sure we've got copies of their insurance on record here. So every subscription renewal, we ask to see that, so that they can at least prove that they're covered. Because not only if they get hit, but if they hit somebody else that's walking on the course, because they go out. So we try to safeguard. I'm not going to say we're 100%, but I think we've gone a lot, because I had a big spat with a member over it, and he actually threatened to take us to court on disability if we didn't do something. We quickly sort of rethought the train and thought, right, okay. And it just happened to be a member had passed away, and his family had this single seat available. We thought, happy days, we'll do that.
Brilliant, yeah.
Make that an availability. And obviously, like with buggies in the summer as well, we always make sure that the disabled or the invalided type of golfer has first dibs at the buggies. And if an able-bodied golfer's got a buggy booked and a disabled person wants it, then the disabled person will override the able-bodied.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. Like you say, you're making every provision and every, you know, you're supporting all players, not just the able-bodied players. It's a good example actually for the clubs that we've had the questions from about what do they do. And like I said, we've said, you know, categorically, unless there is a health and safety reason for them not using it, then that, you know, any other reason will not be accepted in a court. So, you know, they have to make those provisions. Hi, Claire. Hi, Chris. They've just joined. I can say that they're both on mute. Let's see.
Okay.
I'm just going to put myself on.
Yeah, so we've had questions about the use of buggies given the current weather conditions. Also, what we're seeing quite often is someone come up to us. So I'm going to use the example of lateness. You know, employee X has been here 5 years. They've been late 17 times. I want to dismiss them. And, you know, we will push back and say, okay, what did you do when they was late on occasion 1 and 2 and 3 and all the way up to 17? And if the answer is nothing, then, you know, unfortunately, if you were to go straight to a dismissal, you probably very likely lose an unfair dismissal case. Yeah. So there was a recent case in the tribunal, and the employer actually won for once, which is rare to see. But this was a cleaner who had 5 years service, and she was late, but it was a couple of minutes late each day. So she was giving a first written warning for lateness, told it needs to improve. It didn't, it got worse. So although only 2-3 minutes late, it was on 43 occasions. So she went through the disciplinary process again and was put on a final written warning, again told that, you know, your conduct needs to improve. It didn't. She was late on further occasions, so she was dismissed. She tried to bring an unfair dismissal claim, saying dismissing me is not proportionate for being 2 to 3 minutes late. You know, it's not like I was an hour late each time. And she lost her case. And the reason she lost the case is the tribunal was saying it doesn't matter how late you are. The fact is that you were late. You've been given adequate warnings. So she's had the first warning and the final warning. You've been given ample opportunity to improve. You haven't. It was all documented. So she actually lost the case. If this were the example that come to us from one of the golf clubs to say, yes, they've been late all these times, but we've done absolutely nothing about it and now we want to sack them, they would have lost that case. So it's just a reminder really that if you do, sometimes you think it's so minor, I'm not going to do anything about it. But if it is continuous, you do need to start a process, even if you don't go to a disciplinary. You know, okay, you've been late 3 times, we're going to have an investigation meeting. At that meeting, I'm going to ask you why you was late. Your alarm didn't go off. Okay, what set your alarm earlier? Your bus was late, get the earlier bus. You know, listen to the reasons. That's what it's mostly going to be. If there's something a bit more serious, you know, caring for someone with disabilities going on in their lives, you can then go down the support route. But, you know, don't just let it continue and one day think I've had enough and now I want to sack you, because unfortunately you're going to be starting from scratch. It's just that you're going to be starting with someone who's been late 12 times on a first warning when they could have been on a final by now. So it's, yeah, you know, if you're late, have a word with them. Late again, have an investigation, and then take it from there.
I had a similar case actually as well, about an employee who was in probation, And, you know, whilst we've advocate that, you know, under 2-year service, there is no automatic right to an unfair dismissal. This guy, he wanted to terminate. He said, you know, he's becoming unreliable. And we talked about protected characteristics. And I said, look, you know, do you think he has any? And he didn't. Apparently, he didn't have any. But it turns out there was he was a carer, similar to what you were saying there, Catherine, about carers. So although a protected characteristic may not first be visible, unless you've made the effort to take an employee through a process and then you terminate, there is always going to be that risk. You know, there's always going to be that risk that remains. And through the probationary process as well, you should be given an employee feedback. They shouldn't just get, you know, 2 months in, right, there you go, you've been unreliable. Because if somebody has got something that isn't a visible protected characteristic, and they will go off and you've made no effort whatsoever, so you can get blindsided by that. So I kind of went back and I said to the employer and to the club, you know, you should have been kind of checking on their progress anyway, you know, to kind of find out why they were, rather than hit them with this blank kind of, right, we're terminating your employment. So it's just another thing to be aware of, because some of the protected characteristics are not visible. So if somebody's caring for a daughter or a son or another relative who is suffering and they are classified as a carer, then that isn't visible all the time. And then if they've got issues, unless you sit with them and investigate, you're not going to know that. So if you terminate and then all of a sudden they say, well, actually, I was late because of this, you know, that's down to you guys for not thoroughly kind of investigating. I think it's a really important process, whether they're in probation, whether they're under 2 years or not. I think there's a lot of emphasis on the employer to make those kind of investigations ahead of anything else before resorting to a termination.
And that's not just the case for things like lateness and attendance. It's actually the case for most things. So another area where we really see this happening is bullying, for example, where or conduct in general, where someone has poor conduct, they speak to people in a horrible way, or they make snarky comments or that kind of thing. And a lot of the time you hear people say, oh, you know, that's just Jo. She doesn't mean it. She just talks like that. You know, don't take her seriously. It's okay. She doesn't mean any harm. But actually, it continues and it continues and it gets worse and worse and it snowballs. And they get to a point where maybe the actions they are now taking, or maybe the things they are now doing or saying, is now unacceptable. It is now severe. It is causing distress. And now you say, oh, she's horrible and we want to dismiss her. And actually, she's always done this and this and this and this. So I dealt with a case this week where they wanted to get rid of this person as soon as possible because people were leaving because of the way she spoke to people. She came across aggressive. She wouldn't work with other people. She was not a team player. She was supposed to train new people, but she refused to do that. She wouldn't part with information. And actually, it turns out she's been there nearly 2 years. And there has been several complaints from as early on as the second month of employment about this behavior. And they've spoken to her about it informally quite a few times now. And they've tried to help her to behave differently and that kind of thing. And I'm like, so how many times kind of have you spoken to her about this before? Oh, it must be 5 or 6 times. I'm like, could have sacked her by now. So, you know, it's the same thing. And now they want to dismiss her now for this. And I'm like, actually, you're going to have to go through a proper process because you've let it go for so long. So for so long, you've given her the impression that it's okay as long as you say sorry. Now you want to do something about it. So you can't just say you're out. You're going to have to deal with it through a bit of a process.
I think that's the same with long-term sick. And I've been advising any employer who comes to me when they've been dealing with something like that informally, and that's appropriate, you know, sometimes where you just pull somebody aside and say, you know, pull them aside on the behavior, but always follow it up with an email and say, you know, further to our discussion earlier on, I just wanted to remind you of this, because the emphasis is on the employer to be able to document and support that they've addressed the issue. It's not on the employee, it is on the employer. And for me, I've had that a lot with long-term sick cases as well recently. So I've said, have you had any welfare calls? Oh, we've had a call. I said, did you send them an email afterwards to say, further to our call, I just wanted to say that we've discussed this and discussed that. And always with the long-term sick as well, make an arrangement to call them again. Because what I've had is, I've said to them, have you had a welfare call? Oh, no, I haven't, but I'll make the welfare call and I'll send the email. And then they come back and they say, I've made the call, what do I do next? Well, you should have already made a provision to make another call, because when somebody's off long-term sick, there's a lot of things that affect kind of the time of day you might phone them. It could be medication they're on, it could be their mood at different types of the day. So you should always finish that call with, okay, what's the best time to call you next week? I'll check in on you next week. And then you've always got a consistency through the process, rather than leave it, all right, I've made one call and that's my obligations over. That isn't the case. And neither do you want to be seen to be harassing somebody when they're off sick. So it should always be done by a mutual agreement and always followed up in an email to say, right, we've arranged our call for, you know, 10 o'clock next week. If you've got any problems, give me a call, let me know. So it's always the employee then that's coming back and saying, yeah, that's fine, you know, I can do that call at that time. Whereas if you've got somebody who's off and you just phoning them ad hoc, they'd be like, I'm sick, you keep phoning me, this is becoming harassing now. So you've got to be a bit careful on there and always document it. Whether it's an informal process or a formal process, you should always follow up with some kind of documentation. Shall we open up to questions? We've got Mel on, as well as Chris, Claire and Steve now. We've got 4 of you. We're an open audience. Anything from you, Mel?
Yes, of course. If somebody, you know, you over Christmas, because obviously now we're all talking about Christmas and time off and things. If you want somebody to take time off over Christmas, I know you can, because in the handbook it says you have to have saved some and all the rest of it. But what if they haven't accrued enough holiday and you want them to take time at Christmas? Is it unpaid because they've used all their accrued stuff, or how does it work? Or then they have to work?
Well, it's one of those two things. So if you are closed, so if you're closed and your business isn't operating, and you have advised them in their contract or at the start of the holiday year that they had to accrue, I don't know, 3 days or something for the festive break. If they haven't done that, if they've used all their holiday, then it's unpaid. You are not required to now keep your business open for them to work because they haven't done that. However, if you have not informed them, and you can't inform them 2 or 3 months before, you have to inform them at the start of the holiday year, or it has to be in their contracts. And I believe it is in most of your contracts. If you haven't informed them, then your choice is either to be open and let them work, or to pay them anyway for being at home. So yeah, that's the answer.
So when you say inform them, you don't have to draw their attention to the contract or the handbook. You've already told them.
No, because it's in your contract and in your handbook, you have informed them. They are informed.
Okay, that's fine.
If they forget it, that's sad, but they probably.
Okay, sad, but that's the case, right? And so, what if somebody doesn't turn up to work, then calls in late saying, I can't come in because my partner's uncle has died? So in terms of bereavement and all the rest of it, how far placed is it before it's do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah. So first of all, there's 2 bits to this question. So first of all, they've called in after they didn't turn up for work. Now, you would need to look at the circumstances. So technically on paper, that's wrong. Okay, but you would need to look at the circumstances. Sometimes there might be circumstances where you can forgive that once, but never more than once. If it happens a second time where they don't turn up to work and then call afterwards, then it's not okay. And you'll tell them that. You'll say, this is not how it works. You know now, ensure this doesn't happen again. In future, if you're not going to come to work, this is how you report it, not after you're supposed to start. The second one is a little bit more tricky because we use the term immediate family members for something like compassionate leave. But you have to consider that some people are very close with family members that maybe some other people are not. So someone might be incredibly close with their uncle. They might have been half raised by their uncle. And so actually this person, sorry, I have a puppy. That's noisy. And so in some cases, this person might actually be really close to them. So
it's about your relationship with the employee, isn't it?
Yeah, right. Well,
so
she didn't say she was close. She said that her partner was close and that she had to stay home and console the partner.
And that, again, that's something that you'd have to take on board and make a decision as an employee, as an employer, and your relationship with her. Is she that kind of person? You know, you should refer her. I would suggest, Mel, is that you respond to her and say, right, you know, thank you for informing me. I would give her a day perhaps to deal with that. But then reiterate your compassionate leave policy. And, you know, drop her an email afterwards, and, you know, have the phone call and just say, I'm just going to drop you an email as well, just to remind you of, you know, the policy. I appreciate that today is like that. Confirm that the day will be unpaid if it's unpaid, and that you aren't going to pay her for compassionate leave.
Yeah, I don't think you do pay, do you, compassionate leave?
Some employers do, some don't. And if you don't, I would just kind of make sure that she's aware of that, because she might think, oh, that's great, I'm going to be paid for the day, because you're being very empathetic to her and kind of saying, look, I understand you need to be there for your partner today. But I would kind of just say, I'll drop you an email with just a reminder of the compassionate leave policy.
Okay. It's the same one that I said last time, refused to go somewhere because she wouldn't drive on the motorway. And then
okay.
Refused to go an alternative route and all the rest of it. That's that one.
Like I said, just always follow up with that email. You know, say further to our conversation, you know, but mention it to her on the call. Just say, I totally understand the situation. If a partner's inconsolable today, as long as she knows that it's unpaid, and it would go down as an absence as well. So it's something to bear in mind. And just like drop her a nice email afterwards and just say, you know, hope everything's okay at home. Just a reminder of our compassionate leave policy there. And
okay. Yeah. And in the future, if she refuses to go to, I guess it's refusal of reasonable management instruction.
Yeah.
Is that disciplinary?
It is. Yeah. So again, Mel, you'd have to do that investigation. The investigation process is key in any kind of employee-employer dispute, because that's where you establish whether there's any mitigation whatsoever. In this case, obviously, I've discussed that case with you. I don't believe that there is, not a valid reason anyway, or a valid mitigation. That's something you'd have to consider. If she refuses, say, right, I'm inviting you to an investigation meeting. Please come. You know, there's no notice to be given for an investigation meeting, so you can just do it then and there. If she's on site, if not, get her in as soon as possible and get the matter addressed, because, like you say, the more you allow her to do that, you know, it's not your obligation to get her to work. There are other means for her to get to work. You know, there's public transport. If she has to get an Uber, that is the employee's obligation, not yours. Yours is to provide the work, hers is to get to work. Obviously, as a responsible employer, you're going to do everything you can to support her in that. But when it comes to the detriment of the business, and that's what you would describe in the investigation meeting to her, you know, it's detrimental to the business. This happened, this has happened, now you're refusing again. So, yeah. Pick that up with her. Don't let it go on. Okay.
Lovely.
Any
Thank
more
you.
questions from anybody else? Steve, Chris, Claire?
Elizabeth, just with the immediate family then, is it for compassionate leave? Is that like
Yes.
father-in-laws? Is that immediate?
Again, it comes to your relationship with and how well you know your employee. You know,
Sure.
some father-in-laws live with their sons, with their daughter-in-laws or the sons-in-law. So that kind of closeness you would expect. So immediate family generally refer to father, mother, and siblings. But obviously, as a responsible employer, and you know what, you tend to know a little bit about how your employees live and their background. So you consider it on a case by case, on an individual basis.
Okay.
Just assess the situation.
Thank you.
If you're unsure, always, you can always come to us and ask us as well. But with father-in-laws and mother-in-laws, I would kind of suggest that they are classed as immediate, because my father-in-law, for example, lives miles away. I'm not close at all, but I would have to travel, and that's another thing to bear in mind as well when you're considering compassionate leave, is the distance. If you have people working and you know that their families are miles and miles away, is it 2 days going to be enough for them? Because you're going to have the initial grief, and then you're going to have a funeral process further down the line. But everything should be kind of empathetically considered when dealing with any bereavement.
Yeah. And
So
I was going to say it's.
Oh,
sorry.
we're all jumping in today.
Sorry. When you think of a father-in-law, for example, you have to consider that even if that person is not close with their father-in-law, they would need to support their partner who's just lost their father. And that's close. So it's, it really is, there's a statement that says immediate family, but it really is a case by case thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was follow up on that. So when I've had a couple of clubs now come to me and say, we don't want it to say immediate family, just say a bereavement. I think it's because it's such an emotive subject, you do have to use your discretion in every case. I think I'm on my fourth one that said we don't want to put immediate family, because that excludes, you could have a childhood friend that you've had 30 years friendship with and you're excluded from our policy. So this is one of those subjects. It's difficult to have a policy that's actually fair to everyone, without sounding like you're being unempathetic as well. So
How would you deal with somebody who's got a pet bereavement?
Oh, Nadia, I think this one for you, isn't it? Nadia is the animal lover of us all. We've all got pets, but Nadia's got like a menagerie up there of everything. Yeah.
I'm looking for a farm at the minute to accommodate all my animals. That's a difficult one, and we do actually see more and more employers who actually allow people time off for dealing with a pet bereavement. And now here comes the bit where you can't help but be judgy, and you really have to stop yourself from being that. So if you're not a dog person and someone's dog's died, you might feel, oh, it's just a dog. But to that person, it might be their companion, or if you are not, a hamster person and someone's hamster's died, you might not feel the same way. So you need to consider that you would sort of treat all pet bereavements in the same way. With pet bereavements, I would usually say allow someone to use some holiday, paid or unpaid. So I wouldn't class pet bereavements under the compassionate leave policy, but I would allow people some time off, because people are very close with their pets. And some people are closer with pets than others. And we kind of need to respect people in that way. But that doesn't mean you have to pay them to be
I think you have to be consistent in your approach as well. So if one person comes in and says their budgie regards died, you've got to treat it as somebody coming in and their dog dying, who has been really close to them. And as Nadia said, in this case, I wouldn't suggest that you use compassionate leave. You can actually say to them on the call, you can empathize with them and say, look, how did you want to take this day? I'm happy to grant you unpaid leave, or do you want to take it out of your annual leave allocation? I think that's appropriate. Obviously, don't when they phone up and say, my dog's all right, how do you want to take today? That's it. You know, have a little bit of conversation with them. Everybody's human, so, but obviously case by case, and keep it consistent. As Nadia said, a hamster might be equally as important to somebody as a dog that they've had for 15 years. Yeah. Anybody else? No.
No, it's fine, thank you.
Food for thought today, isn't it? It's all about touchy-feely and empathy. A nice one to end on. But stick to processes and stick to investigation processes.
And be consistent.
And consistency, yeah. Well, I think we will close the call now. Thank you for all your time again, everybody.
Thanks
today.
very much.
Thank you.
Take care. See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.